Every morning before the market open, I used to spend hours doing the same thing. Scanning news, pulling economic data, managing my positions, checking my portfolio, doing market research. This would take me a full 2 hours before I even took a single trade. GrokBot fixes that by flipping the whole model. Instead of you chasing the information actually comes to you. GrokBot isn't just another chatbot. It's a team of AI agents that each run on their own computer in the cloud 24/7. I built a 5-agent team, each with one job running every morning before I even open up a chart. One scans macro data, the other one reviews my overall portfolio and its positioning. I have one that can do fundamental analysis on any ticker as well as a competitor analysis. And lastly, I have one that will monitor the crypto markets overnight and give me that report in the morning. So by the time I wake up and get to my desk, I already have 2 hours of work done without lifting a single finger. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I've set up every single one of these agents and the custom prompt that I've built for each of them. Like always, any prompt that I show in this video will be available for free in the description below. The first agent in my 5-man team is called Thad. His job is analyzing economic data so that every morning, instead of having to manually do this, he can present to me what key economic data, for example, specifically for the US, is coming out that day, as well as what the numbers actually mean and give me a nice description. So this is the prompt, right? You are my macro calendar assistant. Trigger every weekday morning before the US session. So the scope is for high impact US data only, right? If you don't specify the type of data, it will just give you data based off of multiple different countries. Whereas, mostly for what I trade, I find that the US data has a far greater impact compared to just some sort of EU data. So the first part is, cover today's scheduled releases and consensus, prior and the last print's direction or a surprise. The second point is what the number actually measures, just in one sentence, and only the part that matters for that specific print. We have the threshold, so what reading counts as hot, inline, or cold. And lastly, it's one line on why the specific print matters now, and then the current debate it feeds into. And I just sort of specified like the type of format that I wanted it to have. And even kind of before putting in the prompt, when I was simply naming the actual agent, you can see that it already sort of was giving me a suggestion on like where to start. Like what do you want me on first? Daily macro briefings, track specific series, research for a trade, or just explore for now. So the reality is that even if I built, sort of my custom prompts for every single one of these agents, for a task that I specifically wanted, if you're someone who just kind of wants to mess around, then you could just simply type in, a specific objective, whether it's like your market research, your portfolio manager, your fundamental analysis, and just see where it sort of guides you and keep kind of exploring the different features or kind of what it recommends. So what I said was provide Wednesday's card now. So we can see here, checking the calendar, we have, at 8:30 PCE on Wednesday, and then we have GDP at 1 p.m. So breaking down, 8:30, the PCE tells us the cons, the prior, the surprise. Then it kind of explains what it is, right? So this is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. The monthly core rate is the one that scores persistent. Now, personally, I don't know what any of these numbers are, but I know that whenever I'm sort of going to be trading for that day, if I'm aware of what economic data there is and that it is high impact, then I know to kind of maybe not position prior to that event and instead wait for that event to kind of finish. So what you'll notice is, with something like FOMC, again, I'd rather for FOMC to be over with and then kind of assess the market the next day and see how I want to position. Because kind of positioning right into those events, if you're a low time frame trader, that's fine. But, for me, kind of more as a positional trader, I don't want to be caught in that volatility during my trade execution. The second agent in my team is called Bob, and his focus is on the news. I was never someone who kind of really kept up to date with, what's going on around the world. I was much more focused on just my trading bubble. Like I traded the charts, I traded the flows. It didn't really matter to me what was going on outside. I could just see it on the flows. But, the more I kind of grow up, the more I realized that it's very good to still be aware of what's going on around the world. Now, where I don't think I have the time to manually do this all myself by scanning through the articles, which is why I've built this prompt that will pull the key events that are going on around the world for specific sectors. And in this case, the sectors that I chose were, in artificial intelligence, model releases, capability results, regulations, compute, or even chip supply. Then the global tech markets, so earnings, guidance, any major moves in large caps. And lastly, the energy sector, so oil, gas, grid, power demand, nuclear, kind of the three sectors that for me are kind of the most important ones that I want to keep a track on, especially as I start to trade, more equities. So what I told it to do was just to provide 5 items per domain. If a domain has nothing immaterial, then, I specified not to force it, right? Because, if it doesn't reach those 5 per sector, although most of the time it would, I just don't want sort of repeated information or just something that's not very important to just be shoved into it to meet that sort of 5-thing quota. And lastly is, again, just the formatting is, what happened in one sentence, plain language, why it matters, and then the second order effect. So once I've activated this prompt, it's scanning the last 24 hours across the AI, tech market, and energy sector. And it has given me this report, as you can see here. Starting off with the AI, we can see that Alabama's AG subpoenaed OpenAI on Monday after a July test in which an unconstrained cybersecurity model left its sandbox. We also have something on the Taiwan prosecutors. So they charged 9 people, including NVIDIA, Supermicro staff, over a scheme that moves 74 restricted B300 AI servers to China. And then moving on to global markets, just telling me options are pricing at 5.4%. One-day move in NVIDIA after Wednesday's Q2 print, so about 280 billion of market cap after a 7-session slide. Also kind of talks about the US 10-year yields dropped about 6 basis points to 4.65%. So what I notice off the top of my head is that it's not trying to reach those 5-point quotas per sector. It's only going to give me kind of those most relevant information, which is what I asked for. Now, in terms of the energy sector, we can see that it's mentioning how Brent fell 4.1% and WTI 3.4%. A 1-week low as traders treated Washington's new Iran sanctions pushed out of less of a supply shock than further military escalations. So before I bore you anymore by reading the news, let's actually move on to the third agent, which is going to be Jeff, who is my analyst. So the prompt that I first came up with is, very basic. It's sort of like you put in the prompt, it's going to give you the result, and it's not something you can kind of do recurrently. Now, there are loads of other ideas that I wanted to do. So for example, if I'm going to have it do analysis on a particular stock, maybe that's a stock that I have in my portfolio or that I want to keep, recurring tabs on. So that's something else that I could kind of specify is, okay, this is a stock that I'm interested in. These are its competitors. And, every week or every couple of days, give me a report on those companies so that I'm always sort of up to date with what they're doing. If you're enjoying the video so far, then don't forget to like and subscribe to show your support. Moving on to the actual prompt, right? You are my research analyst. When I send you a ticker or a project name, produce a structured brief within these 5 points. Number 1 is what it does. So in 2 sentences, someone could easily understand. The tokenomics, supply, emissions, upcoming unlocks in the next 90 days, competitive position, top 2 to 3 competitors, and the honest differentiators, any red flags from the team, concentration, and lastly, the bull and bear case, 3 lines each, and then use current data from official docs and reputable trackers. So the project that I use for this example is ASML. So we can see here that what it does. So ASML builds the machines that print circuits patterns onto silicon wafers, which is how advanced chips actually get made. So, they're producing these chips. Then it gives me a sort of capital structure, right? The equity of the supply, the emissions, any sort of unlocks that they have. Just gives you kind of more details. Shares outstanding, 385.4 million at the year end of 2025. Dividend is quarterly and rising. No lockups, convertibles, or sort of large secondaries in the next 90 days. And the more interesting part is when it does a deep dive into its competitor analysis. What it kind of mentions is, ASML is the only company that sells commercial EUVs, including high NA optics from Carl Zeiss SMT, which ASML owns, nearly 25% of the holding company. So what I'm gauging from this, and that I already know myself, is that they have a very strong monopoly at the moment. Then you have some of the red flags. For example, China being nearly 30% of the sales, down from 36.1%. Bookings were dropped from the headline over Q4 2025. Q2 said backlogs continue to increase with no number set. And lastly, we have the bull and bear case for ASML. The fourth agent on my team is John. His job is to be a market scanner. Now you notice that the prompt that I use in this specific case is more catered towards crypto, as opposed to some of the other ones were much more for, TradFi and equities. So here it's, you are my crypto market scanner. Every morning at 7 a.m. before I open my charts, deliver one concise briefing. One overnight price action on BTC, ETH, and Solana, the direction, percentage move, and whether any key daily levels were reclaimed or lost. Next, it's volatility events, liquidation cascades, sweeps of obvious higher lows or funding rate extremes. And lastly, it's my watch list. So I could give it my personal watch list and then have it flagged any coins that moved a certain percent or have hit a level that I've already marked out. You can see how the result of this prompt is much simpler compared to the previous ones. It just gives me a couple of paragraphs, something that's very simple to read. It talks about how BTC was 78k overnight, negative 2% from 80k. ETH was at 2.457 overnight, negative 1.6% from 2.5k, and the same reading for Solana. The cool thing with GrokBot is you have, on the right here, is I can set the routines. Now, when it comes to getting, market briefings, and again, it doesn't just have to be for crypto. It could also be for stocks as well. But the main point is I can customize this based off of my own, for example, trading schedule. I generally like to get up very early in the mornings, and because I'm monitoring different sort of assets, I would like to be up to date on those, if I'm traveling or if I'm away from my desk. So the way I would sort of set this up is not just have, one recurring alert in the morning giving me that sort of breakdown, but instead kind of have multiple of those throughout the day and maybe get a final report on a weekend that would summarize sort of all of the priced action and sort of market thoughts into one condensed report. Moving on to the final agent, which is for me one of the most exciting ones, which is Chad. And Chad is my portfolio manager. So the prompt that I use in this case is, you are my portfolio manager, trigger every weekday morning before I open charts. I give it my specific holdings, just in percentage. Then I tell it to cover in a specific order. For example, 1, the precision moves, report changes in price on the day and based on the weekly open price. Also report a gap of any size in volume, above 2x of the 20-day average. Then moving on to the company news. So report on any major news announcements that are tied to those companies. And lastly, a sort of rolling competitor analysis for each of these companies. So give me 2 to 3 competitors, as well as, the key suppliers or customers listed in that sort of holding block. And then once I actually run the prompt, you can see how it gives me that sort of detailed breakdown, starting with just Bitcoin and the price movements, the same for ASML, SpaceX, or even Tesla. Then I really like the company news part because just giving me a brief overview of what's the news that's coming out. That way I'm always kind of keeping in track with my own investment holdings. So it says SpaceX will put up 100 billion into Starbase, Louisiana. We also have Tesla, so Cybercab event locked to the 3rd of September in Austin. So the US Cybertruck dual motor and premium all-wheel drive, each at plus 5K today. And for BTC, the US spot ETFs, it is the 6th straight inflow day on Monday with plus 337 million. And for SML, there's nothing material, routine buyback, print only. If there's nothing that's coming out for those specific companies, then it'll just simply say it. And you can see that for the actual competitors part, the overall description is, very, very basic. It's not really going into much detail. It's simply listing the name of them as well as the percentage change in stock on that day. And I guess that if I wanted to do, or I wanted to get a much better understanding of the competitor analysis, then I just have to kind of readjust the prompt and sort of specify that. When it comes to actually installing GrokBot, what you want to do is head over to the x.ai/bot page, and it'll bring you to this page in particular. Then you simply click on download and it'll be available on your desktop. The pricing is where I think a lot of people will be a bit overwhelmed. Because if we head over to just the pricing plan on the XAI pricing, you'll see that you have this free tier, you have Super Grok, and then you have Super Grok Plus. Now Super Grok is the one that will give you access to the GrokBot, which is where you have those group of agents that are running 24/7 on their sort of own computers. Now, instead of paying the $100 a month, you could get access to it using cursor.com/pricing, where you can use the Pro Plus version on the individual plan, and that still gives you access to GrokBot. Now, initially just looking at the pricing, it is much more expensive. And the mistake you'd be making is just comparing it to like the $20 Claude plan. I think instead it's something that's more up there with the max plan that's around $100. The way that I see it is that you're pretty much trading the configuration and setup pains of creating this team of agents yourself through Claude Cowork or Hermes for the elevated cost of utilizing the pre-built framework for GrokBot's agents. Now, of course, if you already have Hermes installed and you're running your agents locally, then I don't necessarily see a reason for you to switch or to utilize GrokBot. And for those also who want to have full ownership of their data, then running your own harnesses and models locally is still a better option. At the end of the day, this is just a lower friction options for those of you who are willing to kind of make that trade. I hope you're able to find some value from today's video. If you enjoy the content and you want to see more, then just make sure to like and subscribe to continue to show your support, and I'll catch you all in the next video.